Hello participants, I am Dr. Saurabh of faculty at Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. I am very thankful to Professor Sanjay Bhardwaj who has invited me for this lecture. My today's presentation is on a reflection on nationalist thoughts. This Indian school of thinking is starting from Chanakya to Shyama Prasad Mukherjee to Pandit Deen Dayal Upadhyay. I am going to present one by one how this has the growth in Indian tradition. My dear participants, in this tradition of Indian political thought, we found that the basis on which all Indian thinkers were trying to make India more glorious was the basis of nationalism, was the basis of socialism, was the basis of justice, was the basis of secularism. They all were looking to free society of evils like Sati Pratha, like dowry, like brutal use of forces, like the religious practices which were inhuman. Their contribution was to make India a proud nation, not only free from the rule of the Britishers, not only to free the country from the foreign rule, but also create an atmosphere, a basis for its own glorious path. Indian social and political thought involves society, economy, and politics. It involves three related issues of nation, nationalism, and national identity. In Chanakya's Arthashastra, the discussed ideas of decentralization, welfare state, public opinion, organization of a state, qualities of ideal ruler, ethical and moral foundations of the society, norms of the political parties, problems of interstate relations, and diplomacy is still relevant. In fight against British colonialism, nationalism was the effective political instrument in political mobilization of the masses. It is very important to argue that how Benedict Anderson in his imagined communities saw this issue of nationalism. As Anderson says, nations were not so much the product of a specific sociological circumstances such as language, race, ethnicity, religion, but were imagined into existence. Partha Chatterjee, in his book Nations and Its Fragments, had the view that mobilizing the imagined communities for an essential political discourse, Indian leaders spoke in native vocabulary. That was the language of the masses. Now, I will discuss Bankim Chand Chatterjee's thought, who in his Anand Math sought to champion the goal of freedom and emphasized concern for national solidarity. I would also like to discuss Raja Ram Mohan Roy's, who established the Brahmo Samaj, and its mission was to combat the social evils in the form of inhuman customs, and which also included the Sati Pratha that was a devil of that particular time, not for the society but for the whole world. Raja Ram Mohan Roy also demanded for freedom of the press, which proved the crucial development in democratization among the indigenous classes in India. Ram Mohan Roy also drew his ideas from Upanishad, while Bankim Chand Chatterjee views was on Gita, and Dayanand Saraswati's ideas were influenced by Upanishads. Dayanand Saraswati not only started a debate on the relative importance of ancient scriptures, but also relied on relative importance of substance of Vedas to regain India's lost glory. Now I will move to Jyotiba Phule, who has argued against the orthodox religious practices. Jyotiba Phule also advocated the girls' formal education and widow remarriage. In this series of Indian nationalists, this is very important to remember Swami Vivekananda, whose nationalism was associated with spiritualism. He liked India's regeneration to her old age tradition of spiritual goal. He said, each nation has a destiny to fulfill. Each nation has a message to deliver. Each nation has mission to accomplish. Therefore, we must have to understand the mission of our own race, the mission to fulfill the place it has to occupy in the march of nations, the role which has to be contribute to the harmony of races. Swami Vivekananda's plea was based on two central features of nationalism. The first was humanism and another was universalism. Swami Vivekananda defined cultural nationalism and supported the philosophy of action in the service of motherland. Swamiji argued that the success or failure were not as important as the performance of one's duty with the purest of means. Swamiji's basis of nationalism was deep concerns for masses, freedom and equality through which one expresses itself, spiritual integration of the world on the basis of universal brotherhood. Swamiji also said his goal was to awaken the masses, making them realize their true potential. He knew that the resource of power of any nation is its people, not the ruling minority, but the subject masses. So the prime need of national integration was the integration of these masses. Now, after Swamiji, I will discuss the views of Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore, who called for the true freedom, which was complete awakening in full self-expression. For him, the spirit of Indianness lied in values like universal brotherhood, spiritual harmony, freedom, equality, and fraternity. Tagore asked for a re-exertion of India's rationality in defeating the brute force of Britishers by moral uprightness and harmonious social interaction. At the similar time, Baba Saheb Bhimrao Ambedkar emphasized on social justice as an inalienable part of constitutional democracy. Baba Saheb argued in favor of comprehensive set of socio-economic and political preferential and supportive policy measures to uplift the status of depressed classes in society. Similarly, we also have to see how Jayaprakash Narayan and Ramanohar Lohia viewed and contributed to Indian thought. tradition. Jayaprakash Narayan believed in Sarvodaya. He has the view that an effective system of decentralization and participatory system of democracy, he called for Lokniti and Lok Shakti in place of Rajniti and Raj Shakti. He called for total revolution to replace the authoritarian regimes. That regimes were not people friendly. So Jayaprakash Narayan had the view that it is the Jan Shakti who has the power to replace the totalitarian regimes, and that is the only way to save the democracies. M.N. Roy, in his New Humanism, argued that radicalism thinks in terms neither of nations nor classes. Its concern is man, which conceives freedom as freedom of the individual. Roy called for abolition of political parties and conduct of political activities to evolve a model of humanist policies. After M.N. Roy, I also have to discuss Ram Manohar Lohiya's views of Sapt Kranti. Ram Manohar Lohia argued for new socialism, which was based on elements like egalitarianism and in the areas of income, expenditure, growing economic interdependence, world parliamentary system based on adult franchise, democratic freedoms and rights of man. Lohia called for Sapt Kranti to infuse a new sense of dynamism in Indian political system. Now we will discuss how Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose contributed to Indian political tradition. He called for a strong state, well-organized party with internal democracy and a multi-party system. With Netaji, after Netaji, it was V.D. Savarkar, which was also against the occupation of India by foreign invaders. V.D. Savarkar called the 1857 revolt as India's first war of independence and called it the natural manifestation of the feeling of independence among the masses. For Savarkar, the indigenous values like Swadharma and Swaraj were important. He calls for Hindu solidarity, whose basis is distinct cultural, historical, religious, social and linguistic communities brought by centuries of association and assimilation. So, in this line, Pandit Deen Dayal Upadhyay also contributed immensely. His value-based politics, challenges of nation building, Congress, his contradiction with Congress, his critique of Western civilization, democracy, socialism, and his importance of Indian culture is also very important. Now, I will elaborate his views also to take this discussion further. First, I would like to say that Pandit Deen Dayal Upadhyay joined RSS in 1942, and later when Shyama Prasad Mukherjee formed Bharatiya Jan Sangh, he joined the Bharatiya Jan Sangh as its general secretary, and after serving for 15 years, he was the president of Bharatiya Jan Sangh. He applied his considerable organizational skills to transforming the Jan Sangh into a significant political force. He also started the weekly magazine Panchajanya, which is still today contributing a lot in making of the nation. Pandit Deendayal Upadhyay's value-based politics was important because that particular time the Congress was the dominant party. At the time of India's independence, the Hindu Mahasabha, Ram Rajya Parishad, the Swatantrata Party were hardly a match to the ruling establishment. The communists and socialists too lacked a national appeal and charismatic leadership. The BJS was established to offer an Indian alternative to the Congress politics. For Deen Dayal ji, politics was not just for capturing power. He insisted on practicing value-based and principled politics. The central thrust of his politics was national interest. Pandit Deen Dayal Upadhyay's party was a growing party and he was the principal organizer. He saw his political party as merely a vehicle to build a nation. Much of his philosophical thinking focused on what constituted the Indian nation and why it had failed to become strong and unified. Pandit Deen Dayal Upadhyay saw failure in moral terms, political corruption, the general public's lack of any urge to make India strong and prosperous, or degeneration of society and fading away of idealism that had inspired the struggle for freedom. Indians had misled themselves into equating freedom with the mere overthrow of foreign rule. Like other Indian political thinkers, Panditji also viewed that the need for something is more positive, a genuine and patriotic love for the motherland. He had the view that contemporary politics in India was based on partial understanding of man and his role in society. The political leadership of post-independent India had attempted to apply Western notions of the good society to Indian conditions, and that results were unsatisfactory. Economic growth was sluggish. Unemployment and exploitation has increased. And as per Pandit Deen Dayal Upadhyay's view, this was the very critical condition for a nation like India. Indian cultural progress was also very slow at that time. Panditji believed that the major schools of Western political thought had failed in fundamentally improving the human conditions of the West itself. And if we rely on the Western philosophies, India cannot move forward. He rejected imitation and called for a serious dissection of the Western concept of nationalism, democracy and socialism to understand predicament and find a way to solve our problems. What Panditji later believed that discounting the universal validity of Western ideologies, he emphasized the relationship of political ideologies to factors of time and place. Deen Dayal Upadhyay mentioned the limitations of the Western concepts in comprehending his own complexities. He said that a fundamental distinction between the state and nation is about the existence of a number of institutions that overlap each other. So, rejecting the centrality of the state, he focused on continuity of the Indian civilization, marked by a predominance of dharma. He has the major contradictions with the ruling Congress party of that time. He had the view that Congress lacked a clear vision. There was no attempt to understand socialism in the historical context of nation building after independence. As the Congress was an umbrella organization with many ideologies coexisting together, it lacked a single focus. So, this was very important to establish a party which focuses not only of emancipation of the society, but also concentrate on making of India a pride nation, concentrating on everyone's welfare, concentrating on economy, concentrating on society, and that also from Swadeshi to a Bharatiya technology. He viewed India as a decentralized polity. On Indian parties, he has the views that parties so easily form alliances without any commitment to principles and programs. Different parties have different viewpoints. People don't take them seriously. Out of goodwill, they sometimes feel that certain political parties should get together. But there are certain fundamental issues that needs to address. That is why he says that we have decided that we don't live in any imaginary world and enter into alliance whose success is doubtful. Nation, democracy and socialism were uncritically accepted by many Indians. Each had a certain merit, but taken alone each provided only a partial solution to the human quest for good life. Panditji believed that nationalism posed a threat to world peace. Democracy, when linked with capitalism, gave free reason to exploitation. Socialism, the reaction to the linked concept of democracy, capitalism, robbed the individual of dignity and freedom. Each of these political concepts stimulated greed, class antagonism, exploitation, and social anarchy. He was also not in favor of capitalism, as he said that the present economic system, which permits a wide disparity in income and in control over the means of production, is unnatural, for it results in exploitation, physical suffering, and weakens the fraternal bonds that link the nation together. Deen Dayal Upadhyay's integral humanism is of much importance in today's Indian polity also. This philosophy is a synthesis of the material and the spiritual, the individual and the collective. He articulated the Indian ethos through integral humanism, which helps build man's relationship with nature, society, other countries, with the self, in contrast to capitalism and communism, which were the two dominant philosophies in early 1950s. He visualized a decentralized polity and self-reliant economy, with the village being the core basis. India as an independent nation which cannot rely upon Western concepts like individualism, democracy, socialism, communism or capitalism. For him, India is in urgent need of a fresh breeze to get rid of the post-independent westernization. Integral humanism is based on spiritualism, which emphasizes that broad socio-economic and political transformation depends mainly on the change in consciousness or psychological change. The title of the World Development Report 2012 also talks about the mind, society, and behavior. The World Development Report recognizes the relevance of the mind and psychology in development of individual as well as that of society. The world has witnessed the eternal validity of the spiritualist thesis that it is change in consciousness or in mindset rather than that in institutions. He felt Indian intellect had been suffocated and Indian polity was no more rooted in the traditions of our ancient culture. This left a roadblock to the growth of Bharatiya thought. Panditji believed in Indian culture. He used the Bharatiya instead of Hindu. He wrote, for instance, Bharatiya values. He also declared a reformist goal while the significance of traditions. He proposes that each nation entity has its own identity, and he used a word chiti for national culture that has evolved out of long association together of a people within a specific geographical space. The natural urge of a people is to unite politically within the geographic area historically connected with the nation. Panditji believed that Indian economy still faces various problems and challenges. Ecological imbalance, terrorism and nuclear threat are the biggest problems that the world is facing. With poverty, illiteracy, the issues related to women, the issues related to infrastructure, the issues related to the society. So, his integral humanism is an inclusive concept that is rooted in the Vedic philosophy of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, which also promotes the coexistence. He believed that the whole solution lies in Bharatiya technology, how the indigenous technology, the Swadeshi technology may create an atmosphere to build a sustainable economy. What applies to America and England does not necessarily apply to India. As an alternative, he proposed a strategy to develop a Bharatiya technology, which is based on Swadeshi and decentralization. From Chanakya to Pandit Deen Dayal Upadhyay, the primary aim of the nationalist views, the thinkers of Indian traditions, were freedom from the foreign rule, emancipation from socio-economic evils, re-established countries' pride and values. All of them have some differences on socialism, on secularism, on nationalism, or how a democracy should function. But their primary aim is to make India a nation, a united place where different sects, different people of different religions, caste, region, who speak different languages may come together and live together peacefully. In this context, Pandit Deen Dayal's concern was that political parties in India should adopt, in place of Western ideologies, the Indian ideologies, the Indian traditions. They should focus on Indian values, which promotes integral humanism, which gives importance to every person. His integral humanism could be seen as an attempt to provide a systematic philosophy of the individual and society from first principles. Thank you.